What if the one man Meghan Markle trusted more than anyone else in her entire Hollywood climb wasn't just protecting her reputation, but hiding the one secret that could burn her entire story to the ground? What if the charming, elusive, always smiling Markus Anderson, the man behind her VIP access, her whispered strategies, her carefully curated image, wasn't just a friend, but something far more complicated, something she never expected to be revealed? And what if the truth didn't just threaten her polished public persona, but reached all the way back to the years she was still married to Trevor Engelson? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Ask yourself this: how would the world react if the man who helped shape Meghan's rise finally decided to speak? What would happen if the keeper of her private life suddenly became its greatest threat? Because tonight, in this investigation, we dive into the story Meghan hoped would never surface. The alleged mistress dynamic, the hidden double life, the tension between ambition and loyalty, and the explosive moment Markus Anderson supposedly decided enough was enough. Before we go any deeper, pause for a second and imagine the emotional chaos behind the scenes. Meghan was trying to break into acting. Trevor was producing and trying to build his own career. Hollywood was brutal, unpredictable, unforgiving. And in the middle of all this stood Markus Anderson, stylish, connected, charming, effortlessly plugged into the most exclusive spaces in Los Angeles, Toronto, and London. Meghan wasn't just connected to Markus, she was attached. She leaned on him. She trusted him with everything. But trust always has a cost, doesn't it? Let me ask you another question. Have you ever met someone whose influence seemed too powerful, too convenient, too perfectly positioned to be a coincidence? Someone who appeared at all the right moments, said all the right things, and opened all the right doors. That's the energy Markus brought into Meghan's life. To some, he was a friend. To Trevor, he was a concern. To Hollywood insiders, he was a strategist. And to Meghan, that's where this story gets complicated. Because the truth is, no one outside their inner circle really knows the full extent of Markus's relationship with Meghan during those early years, especially the period when she was still married to Trevor Engelson. But whispers existed. Staff at Soho House talked. Friends noticed. Even Trevor had moments where he wondered why Meghan seemed increasingly distant, defensive, and emotionally unavailable. Was it just stress? Career pressure? Or was Markus playing a much deeper role than anyone understood? Here's where the contradictions begin to swirl. Publicly, Meghan and Markus were just friends. Loyal, inseparable, ride-or-die companions. But privately, there were rumors of late-night conversations, intimate exchanges, private rooms at Soho House, carefully managed appearances, and a closeness that didn't quite match the boundaries of a married woman. Even people who adored Meghan raised eyebrows. Even those loyal to her questioned what they saw. So why is Markus speaking now? Why break silence after nearly a decade of protecting her image? What if I told you that everything boils down to one critical shift? Meghan rising, Markus fading, and a friendship that once meant everything suddenly becoming disposable. Think about that. The one man who helped shape her transformation, from a TV actress to a global figure, slowly being erased from her narrative. Conveniently forgotten. Quietly pushed aside. When your influence no longer fits the brand, you disappear. And Markus? He didn't take that quietly. But before we reach that explosive moment, you need to understand how deeply connected they were, how entangled their lives became, how the lines between friendship, partnership, and something more blurred until no one could tell where one identity ended and the other began. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just strategic. It was something that sat precisely in the middle, a gray zone that created confusion for everyone around them, including Trevor Engelson, the man Meghan had promised to love. Picture this scene. Meghan walks into Soho House for the first time, nervous, excited, hungry for opportunity. Markus is there, effortlessly charismatic, already a figure of influence. He sees her, recognizes something in her, a spark, an ambition, a willingness to play the game, and offers her what Hollywood rarely gives. Access. Not just access to a club, but access to connections, to whispers, to the carefully controlled world of elite networking. Suddenly, Meghan's life changes. Her circle expands. Her opportunities shift. Her confidence rises. And Markus? He becomes the architect of her new identity. Now let me ask you, if you were Trevor, how would you react watching your wife's world transform overnight? One person becomes the center of her decisions, her outings, her emotional world. You would question it, wouldn't you? Anyone would. But Meghan always had an explanation ready. Markus was just a friend, just a mentor, just helping. And Trevor, busy with his work, tried to believe it, tried to trust, tried to keep his marriage stable. But trust begins to fracture when behavior doesn't match the story. When the phone is always buzzing. When the private jokes become more intimate. When the calendar fills with events you weren't invited to. Let's dig deeper. Meghan wasn't just trying to succeed. She was trying to escape mediocrity. She wanted a new life, a new identity, a new story. Trevor loved her, but love doesn't compete well with ambition, not the kind Meghan had. And Markus? He fed that ambition, encouraged it, praised it. Their dynamic wasn't a simple friendship. It was performance, strategy, desire, and alignment of goals. Markus offered her what Trevor couldn't, a roadmap to the world she wanted most. And here's a detail many overlook. Markus wasn't just a confidant. He was an expert at building narratives, at cultivating mystique, at shaping public image. Who better for Meghan during her early Hollywood rise? Who better to guide her as she reinvented herself, step by step? But here's the twist. Every reinvention requires shedding something, or someone. And Meghan was brutal in her selections. As she climbed higher, her circle changed. As her relationship with Trevor collapsed, Markus became even more central. Some insiders claim Markus was the one who encouraged Meghan to rethink her marriage entirely. Not because he disliked Trevor, but because Trevor didn't fit the future Meghan was chasing. But was that guidance friendly? Or self-serving? Or was it rooted in something else entirely? That's where the alleged mistress dynamic becomes impossible to ignore. The closeness, the secrecy, the late-night strategy sessions that lasted hours, the emotional enmeshment, the blurred boundaries. Hollywood friends whispered about it. Staff at Soho House talked. Even people who supported Meghan privately questioned why she seemed to lean on Markus in ways that made no sense for a married woman. And through all of this, Markus stayed silent. He protected her, defended her, built her up. Until now. So the real question becomes, why is he speaking? Why risk everything? Why crack a decade of silence? What changed? What pushed him beyond loyalty into confession? Tonight, we're going to uncover that. Piece by piece, chapter by chapter. You're going to see what insiders claim happened behind closed doors. The tension, the emotional chaos, the slow-motion collapse of Meghan's marriage, the alleged secret relationship, the power dynamics that shaped everything, and the moment Markus decided he wouldn't protect Meghan anymore. Because according to one source, Markus didn't just know Meghan's secrets. He lived them. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the first moment Meghan Markle locked eyes with Markus Anderson wasn't destiny, but strategy? What if the glamorous, dimly lit room of Soho House, where celebrities whispered, deals were made over espresso martinis, and secrets floated between velvet chairs, wasn't simply the place they met, but the moment Meghan made the first quiet choice that would change everything that came after? And what if Markus, polished in his black jacket and measured charm, already knew exactly who she was before their first conversation even happened? Let's start right there, because everything begins with that first meeting. And it matters more than you think. Picture this. Meghan walks into the Toronto Soho House for the first time, shoulders back, eyes sharp, wearing confidence like armor. She wasn't famous, yet. She wasn't royal, yet. She wasn't even the polished public figure the world recognizes today. She was hungry. She wanted influence, access, visibility. And anyone who has ever chased a dream knows that hunger radiates off you in a way only certain people can detect. Markus Anderson? He could detect it instantly. Have you ever walked into a room and sensed who the most ambitious person was, even before they spoke? That's what happened that night. Meghan didn't need to introduce herself. Markus could feel her energy, her curiosity, her calculation. And Meghan, scanning the room, spotted the most magnetic person there, Markus. The man who seemed to command the atmosphere without raising his voice. The man everyone greeted with a familiar warmth. The man who could open doors she didn't yet have keys to. Was it coincidence? Was it fate? Or was it a moment of opportunity recognized by two people who understood ambition better than anyone in that room? That depends on who you ask. Some insiders claim Markus approached her deliberately, as if someone had whispered Meghan's name to him earlier. Others say Meghan made the first move, offering him that signature smile, warm, inviting, yet calculated in ways only those closest to her ever noticed. But all accounts agree on one thing. There was a spark. Not a romantic spark necessarily, but a recognition spark. You're going places, and I'm the person who can help you spark. Markus introduced himself. Meghan leaned in, and the conversation began flowing instantly. They talked about travel, about acting, about the chaos of Hollywood, about the exclusivity of Soho House. Meghan listened closely, laughed at the right moments, asked the right questions. Markus appreciated that. Meghan knew how to make people feel like the center of attention. She'd perfected the art long before she married into royalty. That night, it worked on Markus. But here's where the contradiction begins to shimmer. Meghan wasn't alone in her life. She was married. She had Trevor Engelson waiting for her, a man she'd been with for nearly a decade, a man who supported her dreams, who believed in her talent, who wanted nothing more than to see her succeed. And yet, who was it she bonded with that night? Not romantically, but emotionally, strategically, intimately in the sense of shared ambition? Not Trevor. It was Markus. And that's where the tension begins without most people even realizing it. Let's be honest. Who you choose as your emotional confidant says everything about what you want your future to look like. And Meghan choosing Markus, even subtly, even quietly, was a choice with consequences. Markus wasn't just a friend. He was a gatekeeper, a connector, someone who understood social ecosystems far more powerful than Hollywood auditions. So ask yourself, what happens when a married woman begins relying emotionally on someone who represents the future she wants rather than the past she lived? What happens when the person she calls first for advice isn't her husband, but a man whose entire world revolves around image, influence, and reinvention? Because that's what started happening. The night of their meeting ended with promises of, "We should talk more," and "Let's meet again soon." Those weren't casual words. Those were invitations into a world Trevor didn't belong to. In the weeks that followed, Meghan and Markus became inseparable. Not openly, not publicly, but strategically. Meghan would stop by Soho House more often, sometimes claiming she needed to work on her scripts, sometimes saying she was trying to network. And sure, she did network. But the person she kept returning to was Markus. The two of them always seemed tucked away in a corner lounge, laughing, whispering, sharing stories, strategizing. People noticed. Staff noticed. Even Trevor eventually noticed, though at that early point, he didn't yet understand what the closeness meant. Have you ever had a friend or partner who suddenly became obsessed with a new person, someone you didn't know, didn't understand, didn't trust? That pit in the stomach? That subtle fear? That's what Trevor felt without ever admitting it out loud. And what made things even more complicated was the nature of Markus's charm. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flirtatious. He wasn't inappropriate. He was the opposite: polished, professional, supportive. But that made it harder. Because it's easy to challenge someone who obviously crosses a boundary. It's much harder to challenge someone who stays just inside the boundary, while leaning as close as possible to the line. That's what Markus did. Always close, but never close enough to be called out. And that's why Meghan trusted him so quickly. Markus had a way of making people feel like he saw the version of themselves they wanted to become. With Meghan, that meant encouraging her dreams, validating her frustrations, telling her she was meant for bigger things. He didn't see her as Trevor's wife. He saw her as a rising star, as someone whose ambition matched the elite crowd he managed, as someone who could move into higher circles if she played her cards right. And Meghan? She wanted that. More than anything. She was tired of waiting for auditions, tired of supporting herself with side jobs, tired of being told, maybe next year. Markus represented a shortcut, not through romance, but through access. But here's where the emotional complexity begins to unfold. Meghan wasn't just influenced by Markus. She admired him. She craved his approval. She echoed his philosophies. She soaked in his worldview. Their connection deepened not because of romance, but because of alignment. Ambition attracts ambition. Always. And while all this was happening, Trevor's world remained unchanged. He stayed committed, supportive, grounded. Meghan's world, however, transformed overnight. Her social circle shifted. Her priorities changed. Her evenings filled with glamorous outings she didn't fully explain. And Markus's influence wrapped around her life like a protective and controlling halo. Was this still friendship? Or was it the beginning of something more complicated? Even people close to Meghan didn't know how to label it. Here's a surprising insight many overlook. Markus had a reputation for becoming deeply entwined in the lives of the women he supported. Not romantically, but emotionally, psychologically, and strategically. He created many ecosystems around certain people. Meghan became one of them. And once Markus pulled someone into his world, he didn't let them go easily. Which raises a very important question. Did Meghan choose Markus, or did Markus choose her? Because according to some insiders, Markus was the one who saw Meghan's potential first. Before the fame, before the press, before the royal connections, he recognized she wasn't just another actress. She had something most people don't. Relentless drive, a hunger for reinvention, a willingness to shift identities to match the moment. And Markus loved that. So when Meghan returned for their second meeting, wearing a dress that insiders still talk about, laughing like she'd known Markus for years, that wasn't just coincidence. That was a bond being solidified, a connection deepening, a partnership forming. And Trevor? He remained in the background, unaware of the emotional shift taking place right under his nose. But here's the part that no one expected, not even Meghan. Because during that first secret meeting, Markus didn't just learn about Meghan's ambitions. He learned something else. Something she told him while swirling a drink in her hand, leaning in a little too close, speaking in a tone that hinted at deeper dissatisfaction than she ever revealed to Trevor. Something Markus kept to himself for years. Something Meghan never thought he would repeat. And that secret? That confession? That moment of vulnerability that slipped out when she let her guard down? That is the very reason Markus's silence didn't last forever. Because what Meghan revealed that night was far more dangerous than anyone realized. But what exactly did Meghan reveal to Markus that night? What was the confession dangerous enough to haunt their entire relationship for years? To answer that, you have to step directly into the moment their worlds began to split in two. One life with Trevor Engelson, the steady, devoted husband, and another life being quietly shaped, molded, and rewritten by Markus Anderson, the man who would eventually become both her greatest ally and her greatest liability. So let's start with the question no one in Meghan's circle dared ask out loud at the time. How does a person manage two emotional worlds at once? How does someone wake up in the morning beside a loving husband, then spend her afternoons confiding in and leaning on another man? And how does someone do this so seamlessly that even those closest to her didn't know which version of her they were getting on any given day? Because that's exactly what Meghan was doing. Living two lives, two identities, two emotional frameworks. On one side was Trevor, loyal, grounded, supportive. He believed in Meghan's dream long before Hollywood even paid attention to her. He financed early projects. He encouraged her auditions. He stood by her through moments of self-doubt. He believed in us, in marriage, in commitment. On the other side, Markus Anderson, the gatekeeper of Soho House, the man whose Rolodex could change careers. The man who understood the psychology of rising through elite circles. The man who knew how to rewrite a public persona from the ground up. And the man Meghan increasingly turned to, not for comfort, but for direction. Ask yourself, when someone begins listening to another voice more than the voice of the person they vowed to share a life with, what does that mean? What does that shift signal? When your partner's primary emotional compass becomes someone else, where does that leave you? Because that's exactly what happened with Meghan. And what makes this chapter so fascinating is not the rumor of romance, though that alone created enough whispers to last a decade, but the emotional dependency that grew between Meghan and Markus, one that became more intimate than anything she shared with Trevor. Let me paint the picture for you. Trevor would come home from long days working on film projects. He'd ask Meghan about her auditions, her meetings, her day. But Meghan's answers became shorter, vague, distracted. She was physically present, but emotionally, her mind was elsewhere. Often with Markus, people underestimate how powerful emotional intimacy can be. It doesn't need physical affection. It doesn't need romance. All it needs is attention, validation, and time. Markus offered Meghan all three. He made her feel seen, admired, supported in ways that aligned with the future she craved, not the present she had. And that's where contradictions began to bloom. Meghan would tell Trevor she was stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted, but then she'd light up instantly whenever Markus texted her. She'd say she needed space to think about her career, but then she'd spend hours tucked away at private Soho House lounges, talking to Markus about her frustrations and future plans. She'd claim she needed to work on scripts, but those script sessions somehow always aligned with Markus's schedule. Was this cheating? Was this innocent? Was this emotional manipulation? Depends who you ask. But the truth is, a double life doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with emotional drift, with small decisions that feel harmless, with one conversation that lasts longer than it should, then another, and another, until suddenly the life you share with your spouse becomes the lesser life, the background life, while the secret life keeps growing. And Meghan wasn't just drifting. She was evolving. The Meghan Trevor knew, sweet, supportive, grateful, began shifting into someone more ambitious, more selective, more calculating. Someone who preferred exclusivity over familiarity. Someone who prioritized strategic relationships over loyal ones. Someone who appreciated Markus's world because it felt like the world she deserved. And if you think Trevor didn't feel this shift, you're mistaken. He noticed everything. He noticed the way Meghan guarded her phone, the way she minimized screens when he walked by, the way she mentioned Markus casually, but too often, the way her tone changed whenever she talked about her new social circles, even the way she started dressing, sleeker, more curated, more brand-aware, signaled a transformation he wasn't included in. But here's where the contradiction bites hardest. Meghan didn't push Trevor away with hostility. She did it with justification, with explanations that seemed reasonable, even thoughtful. I need to focus on myself right now. I'm trying to build my career. Markus is just giving me advice. You're overthinking. I'm allowed to have friends. Have you ever heard someone defend a relationship you didn't question, just so you'd stop looking too closely? That is exactly how Meghan handled Trevor's growing concern. She soothed him. She minimized. She reframed. She turned any discomfort he felt into a reflection of his own insecurity, not her behavior. And when Trevor apologized, thinking he'd been unfair or overly sensitive, Meghan doubled down emotionally with Markus. That is the devastating part, the heartbreaking irony. Because while Trevor was busy second-guessing himself, Meghan was strengthening the bond with the man who represented the new version of her life. And this is where her double life officially cemented itself. She would wake up beside Trevor, go to yoga, make smoothies, pitch self-tape auditions, and talk like everything was normal. But in the afternoon, she'd step into the curated, seductive world Markus cultivated for his elite clients and friends. A world where reality blurred, where ambition sparkled, where future fantasies felt attainable, where she didn't feel like a struggling actress, but like a rising star. Markus knew exactly what she needed, and he provided it. He introduced her to people who spoke her language: stylists, producers, socialites, influencers, wealthy patrons, artistic directors. He opened doors Trevor didn't even know existed. He guided her through social landscapes where power didn't come from talent, but from visibility. And Meghan excelled in that world. She adapted instantly, too easily. So easily that people began asking who she was, where she came from, and why Markus was so invested in her. But here's the twist most audiences never see. Meghan wasn't the only one living a double life. Markus was too. Markus had his own secrets, his own alliances, his own motives for elevating certain people. And while Meghan saw him as a mentor and emotional partner, Markus saw her as a promising asset. Someone who could become something big. Someone who could elevate not only herself, but the world Markus curated. That's why their relationship escalated so quickly. Why they grew so close, so fast. Why insiders still argue over whether it was emotional, strategic, romantic, or something in between. Their connection didn't fit a single box. It spanned multiple. Now here's where things take a darker turn. Because while Meghan embraced this new world, Trevor increasingly felt pushed out of the frame. Not by Markus directly, but by the version of Meghan Markus encouraged her to become. Let me ask you, have you ever tried to love someone who slowly became a stranger? Someone who shifted their priorities, their values, their identity, right before your eyes? That's what Trevor lived through. And it explains the tension that built in their marriage long before the divorce. But there's something else, something far more explosive. Because during one of those early conversations, back when Meghan still felt safe leaning in close to Markus, back when their connection felt like an escape rather than a betrayal, Meghan confessed something. Something she never said to Trevor. Something she never expected Markus to repeat. That confession was the seed of their downfall. The moment Meghan revealed who she really was beneath the charm, beneath the roles, beneath the aspirational exterior. And Markus? He never forgot it. He carried it with him, protected it, buried it, until now. Because the moment he decided to break silence, that buried confession became the one detail threatening to expose the truth Meghan hoped would never surface. And the next step in this story, the first real crack, was triggered not by Meghan and Markus, but by Trevor. Because Trevor saw something he was never supposed to see. And what he discovered would push everything into dangerous territory. But what exactly did Trevor see? What was the moment that took every quiet concern, every subtle instinct, every uneasy feeling in his stomach, and turned it into undeniable suspicion? Before we reach that explosive discovery, you need to understand the emotional terrain Trevor had been walking for months. Because suspicions don't appear out of thin air. They grow, they evolve, they sharpen. They start as whispers that echo inside your mind. Whispers you try to ignore, until they rise into a scream you can no longer silence. So let me ask you, have you ever loved someone so deeply that you convinced yourself to overlook the red flags? Not because you were blind, but because you were hopeful? That was Trevor Engelson, a man who loved Meghan fiercely, a man who believed in her dreams, a man who thought their marriage was built on loyalty and shared ambition. But what he didn't realize was that ambition, when fueled by the wrong influence, can become a wedge. A slow, quiet wedge that pries affection apart until love begins slipping through tiny cracks. Trevor had noticed changes in Meghan, subtle at first, then sharper. She had become more guarded with her time, her phone, and her emotions. She was always busy, always running late, always working on something with Markus. At first, Trevor didn't think much of it. Hollywood was demanding. Meghan was hustling. She deserved her shot. But then it escalated. The visits to Soho House became more frequent. The conversations between Meghan and Markus became longer. The energy Meghan carried home felt different, charged, electric, buzzing with something Trevor couldn't name. Have you ever watched someone you love become excited about things they never share with you? Someone smiling at a text that didn't come from you? Someone glowing after spending time with someone else? The hurt isn't loud. It's quiet, heavy. It sits in your chest like a stone. That's what Trevor felt. But instead of confronting her immediately, he tried logic, understanding, patience. He trusted her. But trust without access becomes anxiety. And anxiety, when ignored, becomes suspicion. The turning point came one night when Trevor came home earlier than expected. Meghan had told him she would be working late on a script. She had said she'd be home by midnight. But Trevor's meeting wrapped up sooner, and he walked into their house around 9:30 p.m. He wasn't trying to catch her. He wasn't checking up. He was just tired. He wanted dinner. He wanted company. He wanted the comfort of his wife. What he found instead was silence. The lights were dim. The kitchen was untouched. The living room looked the same as when he left. Her car was in the driveway, but she wasn't home. That part alone wasn't unusual. Meghan loved walks. She visited friends. She took calls outside. But that night felt different. Something inside Trevor tugged at him. Something intuitive, primal, emotional. And when intuition speaks, even the calmest person listens. Trevor texted her, "Hey, you home?" No reply. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Still nothing. So he walked into the bedroom to change clothes. And that's when he noticed her laptop sitting open on the bed. The screen was black, sleep mode, but her phone was beside it, face down. Meghan almost never left her phone unattended. She carried it everywhere. Yet here it was, abandoned. That was the moment Trevor's stomach dropped. Not because he thought she was cheating, but because something wasn't right. Something felt hidden, misplaced, wrong. But here's the part that makes this moment unforgettable. As Trevor moved closer to pick up the phone, the screen lit up. Not fully, just enough for a notification banner to appear. He didn't touch it. He didn't unlock it. He didn't violate privacy. But the notification flashed quickly, as if taunting him, as if daring him to pretend he didn't see it. A message from Markus. Not a quick one-word message. Not a casual check-in. But a long, paragraph-style text, fragmented by the limited width of the banner, filled with something that didn't look like a normal friend's conversation. Trevor didn't catch all of it, but he saw enough to freeze him in place. Soho House staff are asking why we're always together. Told them we're working on your project. Don't worry about Trevor. That last line, those 3 words, hit Trevor like a punch to the chest. Don't worry about Trevor. Why would Markus need to reassure Meghan about Trevor? Why would staff be asking why they were always together? Why did Meghan need to be reassured at all? Trevor didn't explode. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. The pain wasn't loud. It was quiet. A deep, suffocating ache that settled into his chest like cement. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, replaying every moment from the past few months. Every lie disguised as a busy schedule. Every just a friend comment. Every night she spent with Markus instead of him. But pain quickly turns to denial. And denial, especially when you love someone, becomes bargaining. Trevor told himself he could be overreacting, that he didn't read it correctly, that maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But the human heart knows when something is wrong long before the brain accepts it. So Trevor waited. When Meghan finally came home, around 11:45 p.m., she entered the house humming, as if her entire life was perfectly light and carefree. She walked into the bedroom, saw Trevor sitting on the edge of the bed, and froze, but only for a second. "You're home early," she said with a practiced smile. Trevor asked her how her script work went. She said it was productive. She said she met with a friend. She said Markus had stopped by briefly. She said everything except the truth. So Trevor tested her. He asked, "Do you and Markus hang out at Soho House a lot?" The way Meghan's expression shifted, subtle, quick, instinctive, told Trevor everything he needed to know. Her eyes tightened. Her lips pressed. Her breath hitched for a split second before she regained composure. "We just work on stuff," she said. "It's nothing," she said. "You're being insecure," she said. Insecure. That word is the dagger people use when they need to silence suspicion without addressing the cause. Insecure means you're the problem. Insecure means you're imagining things. Insecure means stop questioning me. But Trevor wasn't insecure. He was observant. And he was tired of feeling like a stranger in his own marriage. Have you ever felt insulted by someone who pretended to comfort you? That's what happened next. Meghan sat beside him, touched his arm, and told him he had nothing to worry about. The same words Markus had used in his message. The exact same line. Nothing to worry about. But now Trevor was worried. More than ever. Over the next few days, his mindset changed. Before, he trusted Meghan because he believed honesty was the foundation of their relationship. Now, he watched her behavior more closely, not out of paranoia, but out of self-preservation. And that's when the second wave of suspicion hit him. Every time her phone buzzed, she tilted it away. Every time Markus texted, her expression brightened. Every time Trevor mentioned date night, she suddenly had commitments. Every time he asked about her schedule, she became defensive. Have you ever watched someone build a life you were no longer part of? That's exactly how Trevor felt. And each day widened the emotional distance between them. But the moment everything snapped, the moment Trevor realized something was seriously wrong, came 2 weeks later at a Soho House event he wasn't supposed to attend. Trevor had planned to spend the evening with friends. But halfway through dinner, one of them mentioned they were heading to a small industry mixer at Soho House. Curiosity tugged at Trevor. He hadn't been there in months, not since Markus entered Meghan's orbit. He didn't intend to spy. He didn't even expect Meghan to be there. But something inside him, the same instinct that caught that text, told him he needed to go. And he did. When Trevor walked into the dim hallway connecting the lounge to the courtyard, he saw them. Meghan and Markus. Close. Too close. Not touching. Not kissing. But standing in a posture that screamed intimacy. Meghan leaning in. Markus speaking softly. Their faces inches apart. Her smile, small, private, secretive, was not the smile she used with Trevor. It was a smile Trevor had never seen. And then, the laughter. That quiet, warm laugh that she only used when she felt completely understood. Trevor froze. Have you ever witnessed something that confirmed every fear you tried to ignore? Because that moment didn't lie. That posture didn't lie. That shared energy didn't lie. Trevor didn't approach them. He didn't cause a scene. He didn't interrupt. He watched. And in watching, he saw the truth. Meghan had an emotional world with Markus that Trevor could never penetrate. Eventually, she noticed him. Her eyes widened. Her posture snapped straight. Her smile vanished. But the guilt, that flashed instantly. That was the confirmation. She walked toward him quickly, almost too quickly, speaking in a tone that tried to sound casual but trembled underneath. What are you doing here? Wrong question. The right question should have been, did you see something that hurt you? But Meghan didn't ask that, because she already knew what he had seen. Trevor didn't confront her, not that night. He said he just stopped by, that he didn't mean to interrupt. But Markus stood behind her, looking at Trevor with an expression Trevor would never forget, an emotionless, calculated gaze. A gaze that said, this world belongs to me, not you, not anymore. Trevor left early. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't accuse. He simply walked away, carrying the heavy weight of a truth he could no longer deny. And that moment, that betrayal disguised as just a conversation, was the spark that ignited the firestorm that followed. Because Trevor didn't realize it yet. But what he saw that night was only the beginning. The next revelation? The next secret? That one would shatter everything. But what exactly was the truth Trevor was standing on the edge of discovering? What was the thing Markus had spent years hiding behind a polished exterior of loyalty and exclusivity? And why did so many insiders whisper the same thing? That Meghan and Markus were far more emotionally entangled, and possibly physically involved, than anyone dared admit at the time. To understand the explosion that was about to happen, you have to step into the hidden corners of Meghan and Markus's dynamic, where friendship blurred into partnership, partnership blurred into intimacy, and intimacy blurred into something that neither one of them ever publicly acknowledged. Not back then, not even now. So let's begin with the uncomfortable question. What did Markus claim really happened between him and Meghan during those early years? Was it emotional? Was it strategic? Was it romantic? Or was it something messier, something that doesn't fit neatly into one word because their connection wasn't one thing, it was everything all at once? Ask yourself this. When two people spend late nights whispering in dimly lit lounges, when they share secrets no one else is allowed to hear, when they lock eyes with an energy that staff members still talk about years later, is that just friendship? Is that just mentorship? And if it is, then why did Trevor feel what he felt? Why did Markus send messages telling Meghan to not worry about Trevor? Why did Markus become the emotional gravity Meghan orbited around? Because the truth is, emotional closeness often feels like a confession waiting to happen. And Meghan confessed plenty, just not to her husband. Let's go back to that second or third private meeting at Soho House. Not the polished events, not the public gatherings, but the quieter nights. The ones without cameras, without friends, without curated appearances. The nights when Meghan removed the mask she wore for the world and let Markus see the parts of herself she hid from everyone else, especially Trevor. According to insiders who later spoke privately, Markus and Meghan were inseparable during those nights. Not physically entangled in a stereotypical romantic way, but emotionally wrapped around each other. They would sit close, very close. They would talk about things that had nothing to do with acting or work. Meghan would vent. Markus would listen. They would laugh in ways that suggested inside jokes Trevor was never part of. And Meghan, by her own words, felt more understood by Markus than she did by her own husband. That alone creates emotional infidelity territory. But this story goes deeper. Because the moment insiders started noticing that Meghan and Markus weren't just friends, but partners in secrecy, was when they began meeting in private rooms at Soho House. Now, private rooms don't automatically indicate romance. They can be used for confidential conversations, business meetings, or simple discretion. But in Meghan and Markus's case, it became a pattern staff could see, a pattern friends whispered about, a pattern Trevor never fully understood but always felt. But the real spark, the real moment that shifted everything, was a single confession Meghan made to Markus during a late-night conversation that sources claim became the foundation of their alleged affair dynamic. Meghan told Markus she felt unseen in her marriage. Unseen, overlooked, unappreciated. A confession like that is not friendship. It is vulnerability. Vulnerability that opens the door to emotional replacement. Vulnerability that makes someone like Markus, charismatic, attentive, strategic, step into a role Trevor didn't even know he was losing. Now here's where things get even more complicated. Markus allegedly admitted years later that there were moments, fleeting, dangerous moments, when the line between friendship and something more blurred so deeply that he didn't know which side he was on anymore. He allegedly spoke of nights when Meghan leaned into him, fully trusting, fully exposed emotionally. He spoke of moments when she placed her hand on his arm and held it just a little too long. Moments when she laughed in ways that felt intimate, not friendly. Moments when she gazed at him with a softness that didn't belong to someone who claimed to be happily married. Did they kiss? Did they sleep together? Did they cross the line? That depends on who you ask. Some insiders swear they did. Others insist it was purely emotional. But the one person who knows the truth? Markus. And based on everything we've heard, everything he has allegedly revealed, there was something between them that neither one of them ever dared name, because naming it would have destroyed everything. And perhaps that's why Meghan confided in him the way she did. Because she knew he wouldn't judge her. She knew he wouldn't push her away. She knew he was the one person who would understand her hunger for something more than Trevor could offer. But you want the moment where the alleged affair dynamic became undeniable? The moment insiders still talk about? It happened on a Sunday afternoon, outside the public eye, in one of the smallest and most exclusive lounges at Soho House, Toronto. One staff member later said, "They sat together like they were in their own world. Anyone watching could see it. You don't sit that close to someone unless you're emotionally involved, or more." And here's the emotional beat that changes everything. Meghan wasn't nervous. She wasn't acting like someone hiding wrongdoing. She acted like someone comfortable. Too comfortable, with Markus. She played with her hair while he talked. She leaned forward, her knee brushing his. She whispered into his ear. He touched her back lightly, just enough to guide her. She laughed with her head tilted in a way women only tilt for men they feel safe around. And then, when they thought no one was watching, Meghan placed her hand on Markus's cheek for a split second. It wasn't a long gesture. It wasn't dramatic. But it was intimate. Too intimate. Trevor had never seen her do that. Trevor never got that softness. And something else happened in that moment. A subtle shift in Markus's expression. A softness. A flicker of something unspoken. A look that suggested this wasn't new for them. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. A routine. A connection that had evolved into something neither wanted to admit, but both felt. Now, Markus didn't publicly confess an affair. But insiders say that when he later broke his silence, he didn't deny it either. Instead, he used vague, but damning, phrases like, "We were very close. There were moments. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. We crossed lines. Trevor was never meant to know." That last one, "Trevor was never meant to know," is the line that hits hardest, because it implies intent, secrecy, awareness of wrongdoing, awareness of betrayal. And Meghan? She never admitted anything. Not publicly. Not privately. Whenever pressed, she dismissed rumors with a practiced shrug and a line she repeated to multiple people. "People always misinterpret my friendships. But friendships don't normally have to be defended this hard. Friendships don't create this level of scandal. Friendships don't make husbands suspicious. Friendships don't require secrecy and private rooms and hidden messages." Something deeper was happening. But here's the part no one prepared for. The twist that changed everything. Because while Meghan and Markus were wrapped in their dual emotional world, something else was happening behind the scenes. Trevor's quiet suspicion shifted into quiet preparation. He wasn't clueless anymore. He wasn't naive. He wasn't blindly trusting. He was watching, listening, collecting small moments, noticing inconsistencies. And then he found something. A detail so small, so hidden, so seemingly insignificant, that once he saw it, the entire picture snapped into place. A detail linked to Markus, linked to Meghan, linked to the lies she told. A detail that confirmed the affair wasn't just emotional. And when Trevor discovered it, everything changed. Because the moment he confronted Meghan, the fallout was far bigger than either of them expected. What happens when someone who has spent months building a perfectly controlled double life suddenly finds themselves cornered by the one person they thought would never question them? What happens when the truths you've carefully buried are dragged into the light by someone who still believes in your goodness? And what happens when a confrontation isn't just a confrontation, but a collapse? Because when Trevor Engelson finally confronted Meghan Markle about Markus Anderson, after uncovering that small but devastating piece of evidence, it wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic in the Hollywood sense. It was quiet, icy, intimate. And according to those close to the couple at the time, it was the moment Meghan realized her carefully curated narrative was slipping out of her hands. Let's start with the discovery that pushed Trevor past the point of denial. It wasn't a text message. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't gossip. It was something deceptively simple. Something Meghan thought she had hidden perfectly. Receipts. Literal receipts. A set of Soho House charges, 2 cocktails, 1 dinner, a private room reservation that didn't match Meghan's timeline for that night and didn't match her location. Meghan had told Trevor she was having dinner with a friend from yoga. She even mentioned the restaurant. She was confident, casual, believable. But the timestamp on the receipt told another story. She was at Soho House, in a private room, with Markus Anderson. And Trevor realized this wasn't an isolated lie. This was a pattern. So when he approached her, he wasn't emotional. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusatory. He simply held the receipt in his hand and said, quietly, "Please explain this. Have you ever seen someone's face shift in an instant, from confidence to panic?" Because that's exactly what happened. Witnesses say Meghan's expression changed faster than anyone expected. Not because she was caught in a physical affair. There was no smoking gun, but because she was caught in a lie. A lie she didn't think Trevor would ever cross-check. That's when Meghan's masterful emotional pivoting began. And this is where the contradictions, the psychological manipulation, and the defensive strategies became impossible to ignore. Because Meghan didn't deny it. Not at first. Not immediately. Instead, she paused, calculated, and then said, "You're overreacting." That was the first strike. Overreacting. The word people use when they need to shift guilt away from themselves and onto the other person. Trevor stayed silent, waiting. Meghan continued, "It's just Markus. We were talking about industry connections. It wasn't a big deal. But the receipt showed dinner for 2. Late evening. Private room fee. That wasn't business." And Trevor knew it. So he asked one simple question. "Why did you lie about where you were?" And that question, those 9 words, broke the facade completely. According to insiders, Meghan reacted in stages. Rapid, emotional stages that revealed far more than she intended. First came anger, the fastest defense mechanism. "I didn't lie," she said sharply. "Why are you acting like this? Why would you even check up on me?" Trevor didn't flinch. He held the receipt between 2 fingers and said, "You told me you were somewhere else." Then came the second stage, deflection. "I was going to meet my friend afterwards. I forgot to tell you I stopped by Soho House. Markus needed help with something. You're making this into something it's not." But Trevor wasn't making anything. The evidence was right there. And Meghan, realizing her initial strategies weren't working, moved into stage 3, victimhood. "You don't trust me. You've never understood how hard this business is. You're suffocating me. Everyone questions my motives. Markus is just a friend. Why is that so threatening to you? Have you ever watched someone blame you for discovering their lie?" That's exactly what Meghan did. She turned the conversation upside down, twisted it until Trevor was the one on the defensive. But Trevor didn't crumble this time. He stayed steady. He stayed calm. He asked the same question again, softly. "Why did you lie?" And that's when Meghan broke. Not in tears. In silence. A quiet, heavy silence that filled the room like fog. A silence that signaled something deeper than guilt. It signaled decision. Because what she said next wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't clarity. It was strategy. "I don't have to report every detail of my life to you. Every detail. Not, I didn't lie. Not, you misunderstood. Not, nothing happened." Her choice of words mattered. She wasn't defending innocence. She was defending autonomy. That difference shattered something inside Trevor. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized this version of Meghan wasn't the woman he married. This was someone else. Someone sculpted by ambition and secrecy. Someone influenced deeply by Markus's worldview. Someone who had learned how to control a narrative, even inside her own marriage. And then came the final blow. Meghan's voice dropped. She leaned back, folded her arms, and said, "Marcus is important to me. You need to accept that. Important. More important than Trevor. More influential. More present in her emotional life." That was the admission Trevor never fully recovered from. But here's where the psychological storm truly intensified. Because after the confrontation, Meghan didn't apologize. She didn't reassure him. She didn't comfort him. She didn't even clarify her behavior. Instead, she grew cold, detached, distant. For days, it was punishment through silence. Punishment through withdrawal. Punishment for daring to question her. And that silence was worse than any argument. Trevor tried to reconnect. She avoided him. He tried to talk. She shut down. He tried to express how hurt he was. She rolled her eyes and said he was being dramatic. But here's the surprising twist. While she ignored Trevor, Meghan became even closer to Marcus. Insiders say she met with him 3 times that same week, twice at Soho House, once at a private apartment. And during one of those meetings, she vented to Marcus about the confrontation, called Trevor jealous, said he didn't get it, said he was holding her back. Those words would echo later, because those words signaled something deeper, something irreversible. Meghan wasn't defending her marriage. She was defending her connection to Marcus. But here's where the emotional contradiction explodes. Meghan didn't break things off with Trevor immediately. No, she did something far more painful. She tried to maintain both worlds. Continue her marriage on the surface. Continue her closeness with Marcus in secret. She split herself in two. The wife at home. The rising star at Soho House. But no one can sustain a double life forever. And while Trevor was still reeling from her reaction, Meghan made one crucial mistake. She underestimated how much Trevor had seen, how much he had felt, how much he was quietly beginning to uncover. Because Meghan's defensive rage wasn't the real warning sign. Her silence wasn't the real clue. Her lies weren't the real shift. The real shift was this. Trevor was no longer in denial. He wasn't confused. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't imagining things. He was watching, observing, connecting dots. And he was preparing for a truth he didn't want but could no longer avoid. The truth that would soon come not from Meghan, but from the people who had seen everything. Because the next blow to Meghan's marriage didn't come from Trevor's investigation. It came from inside Soho House, from a staff member, someone who saw something Meghan desperately hoped would stay buried. And what they revealed would send shockwaves through everything that followed. What happens when the walls you think are protecting you are actually filled with witnesses? What happens when the place you treat like your secret sanctuary, your private world, your escape, turns out to have eyes and ears everywhere you never anticipated? Because the truth about Soho House is simple. Nothing stays hidden there forever. Not the whispers, not the glances, not the secrets exchanged in dimly lit corners, and definitely not the kind of closeness Meghan and Marcus shared. So let me begin with a question. Have you ever done something you thought no one noticed, only to find out later someone saw everything? That is exactly what happened to Meghan. She assumed the staff were invisible, background characters in her life. But staff at elite clubs are invisible only by choice. They see everything. Every entrance, every exit, every overly familiar gesture, every suspicious laugh, every glance that lasts a second too long. And what the Soho House staff saw during those months, well, that's what cracked the illusion for Trevor Engelson long before Meghan realized her world was unraveling. Because after Meghan's explosive confrontation with Trevor, after she dismissed him, minimized him, made him feel like the villain in a story he didn't even know he was part of, Trevor turned quiet again. Not defeated, not clueless. Quiet in the way people get when they've stopped guessing and started looking. He began asking small questions, neutral questions, questions that didn't raise alarms, but that gave him tiny pieces of a bigger puzzle. He asked mutual friends. He listened more closely to Meghan's explanations. He took mental notes about inconsistencies, but he didn't have solid evidence. He still clung to the hope that he was wrong. Then one day, he made a decision. A simple decision. A painful decision. A brave decision. He went to Soho House. Not to spy. Not to confront. But to see. To see for himself. And what he saw wasn't the smoking gun. Not yet. But it was a clue. A whisper. A signal. And it came from the unlikeliest place. A conversation with a staff member. Here's how it began. Trevor walked in, trying to look casual, trying to appear like just another member stopping by for a drink. But he wasn't casual. Inside, he was shaking. He had no script for this moment. No plan. Just a desire to understand what was happening to the woman he loved and the life they built. When he entered, a familiar server approached him. Someone who had served him and Meghan many times. Someone who recognized them as regulars. A couple who used to sit together, laugh together, enjoy small plates and wine together. But that server hadn't seen them together in months. So when Trevor approached the bar, the server walked over with a warm smile and a casual question. Haven't seen you two around together lately. Everything all right? A simple question. An innocent one. But it was a detonator. Trevor paused, swallowed hard, and forced a smile. Yeah, everything's fine. Meghan's just busy, he said. But the server's expression shifted, subtle, hesitant, almost confused. Oh, they replied softly. It's just that she and Markus are in here all the time. Trevor's heart slammed in his chest. All the time. He tried to stay calm, tried to breathe, tried not to react. Because you don't explode when someone confirms your worst fear. You freeze. He asked, trying to sound curious rather than panicked. Yeah? They've been working together on things. But the server didn't know they were stepping into dangerous territory. They didn't know they were dropping a bomb. Oh, definitely, the server said. They're always in the private lounge. Staff were even talking about how close they look sometimes. I mean, no judgment, but it's noticeable. Noticeable. That single word nearly broke Trevor. He managed a tight smile. Thanked the server. Then walked away before he could hear anything else. But the damage was done. His worst fear wasn't just in his imagination. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't insecurity. People who had no reason to lie. People who had no stake in their marriage. People who watched Meghan from the outside. They saw something. Something real. Something intimate. Something that didn't match the story Meghan told him. But that wasn't the end. Because a week later, another staff member, one who knew Trevor less intimately, but knew Meghan and Markus extremely well, approached him directly. Not with cruelty, not with malice, but with the kind of concerned expression people get when they're witnessing a slow-motion tragedy and don't know whether to intervene. It happened on a Wednesday night. Trevor was sitting alone in the lounge area, nursing a drink, trying to gather courage. And then a woman with a name tag he recognized, someone who usually worked at the front desk, walked over. Sorry, I don't mean to intrude, she said hesitantly. But are you Meghan's husband? Trevor nodded, confused but polite. She inhaled slowly, then said something that would live in his memory forever. I think you deserve to know she's been spending a lot of time with Markus, and people are talking. Staff, members, it's becoming noticeable. There it was again. Noticeable. The same word. From two different people. In two different contexts. No coordination. No agenda. Just truth. But the staff member continued. And this is the part that pushed the story from suspicion into scandal. She said, last week, I walked into the private lounge to check on something, and I saw them sitting very close. Too close. It was intimate. Not in a physical way, but in a way that made me uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. That word carries weight. Uncomfortable means boundaries were crossed. Uncomfortable means energy was wrong. Uncomfortable means people saw something they shouldn't have seen. Trevor sat frozen, every breath heavy, every heartbeat sharp. The staff member, realizing she may have said too much, tried to soften it. I don't want to jump to conclusions. I'm not saying anything happened. I thought you should know. Trevor thanked her quietly and left. He didn't finish his drink. He didn't confront Meghan yet. He didn't explode. He didn't collapse. He walked out of the building and sat in his car for nearly half an hour, gripping the steering wheel, staring into nothing, trying to digest the truth unfolding around him. But the real shock was yet to come. Because 3 days later, another staff member, not one who knew him, not one who served him, not one who recognized him as Meghan's husband, revealed a detail that cracked the story wide open. A detail Meghan had tried desperately to bury. This staff member, according to a friend of Trevor's who later shared the account, was responsible for managing bookings for private rooms. They handled reservations, schedules, and guest lists. They had seen everything. And what they revealed was this. For months, longer than Trevor knew, Meghan had been booking private rooms under Markus's name. Not her name. His. Sometimes she paid. Sometimes he paid. Sometimes it was charged to a back-office account. but the pattern was unmistakable. Private room, 2 occupants, closed curtains, extended hours, frequent meetings, late nights, and almost always, Meghan and Marcus. Now, does that prove a physical affair? No. But does it prove something was deeply, dangerously intimate? Absolutely. Because people don't hide innocent things. People only hide the things they're afraid will be misunderstood, or understood exactly the way they fear. And Meghan?